Hey there, and welcome to 60 Minutes, the place where shadows tell their secrets, and the things that go bump in the night aren't just stories. Before we dive in, I want to ask you, where are you watching from? Drop your city or state in the comments, because you're about to experience some chilling stories together with viewers all across the country. Tonight, I want you to do one thing. Pay attention. Every sound, every whisper, every shadow you imagine could be real. Grab a blanket, maybe a snack, but don't get too comfortable. The stories tonight will make you question every dark hallway, every empty classroom, and even the reflection in your mirror. Here's a little challenge. As you listen, keep your eyes open, even if the lights are dim. Did you hear a creak just now? Did something move out of the corner of your eye? If so, then you're ready. What comes next are tales that will creep under your skin, haunt your thoughts, and maybe even follow you to bed. Let's get started, if you dare. It was just another ordinary day at high school. The sun was dipping low behind the tall gym windows, casting long, uneven shadows across the polished floor. The smell of sweat, mixed with the faint tang of old polish and chalk, hung in the air. Sneakers squeaked against the floor as basketballs bounced and rolled, echoing across the gym like tiny drum beats. Laughter filled the space, and someone yelled across the court, teasing a friend for missing a shot. Even amid the normal chaos, I noticed something off. Shadows seemed to shift when no one moved. A faint chill crawled up my spine, prickling my skin. I glanced around, trying to brush it off. My friends laughed and joked, oblivious to the feeling that had settled over me. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't explain it. My chest felt tight, my stomach uneasy, like a premonition pressing down on me. I found myself watching the corners of the gym more than my friends, noticing the subtle movements of dust in the air, the way light bent around the edges of the bleachers. Practice began. Whistles blew, sneakers squeaked, balls thumped. Everyone was moving, stretching, dribbling, passing. And yet, I thought I saw a shadow flicker near the bleachers, moving against the grain of normal activity. My stomach twisted. Coach's brow furrowed as he scanned the gym, though he didn't say anything. I tried to focus on the warm-up, but every sound seemed amplified. The squeak of a shoe, the bounce of a ball, the tap of a locker in the distance. Every small noise felt like it could give something away. My friends didn't notice. They were joking, stretching, arguing about who could make the next shot. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, every pulse reminding me of the strange unease pressing down on the gym. As I moved across the court, a memory hit me like a cold wave. Last year, during a similar practice, someone whispered about a shadow man who had been seen in the gym after hours. Kids joked, calling it a prank or imagination, but I remembered how uneasy I had felt then, a similar chill in my chest, the feeling that someone or something was always just out of sight, waiting. That memory, long buried, now clawed back to the surface, making every shadow feel alive, every whisper of air suspicious. Then it happened, the siren, piercing, ear-shattering. The sound tore through the gym, cutting off balls, voices, laughter. The speakers crackled, and a voice came through, sharp and urgent. "This is not a drill. Secure immediately." Coach yelled for everyone to leave. Panic erupted. Bags banged against lockers and gym benches. Shoes squeaked as we ran toward the hallways. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls. Every corner felt darker than it should. My heart pounded. Adrenaline surged, making every step echo like a gunshot. My chest ached with tension, my stomach twisted with fear. I could hear the echo of footsteps bouncing off the walls in strange, unnatural rhythms. We slammed the locker room door shut, the metal clanging, echoing down the hallway. The room was dark, cold, smelling faintly of bleach, sweat, and something earthy I couldn't identify. We crouched between lockers, trying to become invisible. Every small noise became enormous. A creaking locker made us flinch. Air vents whispered. Water dripped from a pipe, each droplet echoing like a metronome of fear. My friends whispered prayers to each other, trying to calm down. My own breathing felt deafening. The silence pressed on us like a living thing, heavy, unyielding, almost intelligent in its intensity. I could feel my pulse in my temples, hear it thudding with each imagined movement outside the lockers. I remembered staying late in the gym once, after band practice. The locker room had felt wrong. Too cold, too quiet, like the air itself was holding its breath. I thought I saw movement along the lockers, but no one was there. Now, crouched in this same locker room, I realized that unease had never really left me. It had been waiting for this moment, for the fear to rise fully, and now it was consuming me. Then we heard them. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, heavy. Not hurried, not panicked, just purposeful. 1 step, 2 steps. Closer. I pressed myself further into the locker, heart hammering. The air felt thicker with each beat. Shadows stretched across the room in ways that made it impossible to tell what was real and what wasn't. Every small sound, the drip of water, the hum of the lights, the squeak of a locker, felt like a signal marking our position. My friends' breaths were shallow and fast, their hands shook. I imagined the figure moving around the room, precise, deliberate. Shadows twisted with it, stretching across the lockers and walls. I began counting things in my mind to keep my fear from consuming me. Count the lockers, count the tiles, count the cracks in the floor. But the numbers didn't help. Shadows moved, air shifted, and the fear returned with full force. I imagined every possible route it could take, every corner it could hide behind. I imagined hearing a whisper behind me, even when there was nothing there. My friends were silent, tense, and I realized we all felt the same unspoken dread, connected by the uncertainty of what was out there. A locker handle rattled just once. Then a whisper, soft, chilling, sliding through the vent. "I can see you." We froze, every breath caught in our throats. Silence descended, heavy and suffocating. Minutes stretched like hours. Every dripping sound, every creak, every small movement became a signal. The shadows felt closer, pressing in from all sides. Fear wrapped around us like a thick blanket, impossible to shake. I closed my eyes, trying to slow my breathing, trying to stop imagining it. But my mind painted endless possibilities. Hands reaching under lockers, eyes staring from vents, the figure sliding silently closer. My friends whispered, trembling, "Don't move, it's still there." The tension stretched endlessly, every second a lifetime. I could feel the walls pressing closer, the shadows bending around us. I imagined it moving around the room, precise, deliberate, tall, thin, hoodie maybe, silent steps that somehow echoed. Shadows twisted with it, stretching across the lockers and walls. My friends whispered prayers, voices trembling. I dared not move. My body ached from tension. Every creak, every distant sound made me flinch. I imagined it pausing, listening, counting, waiting, watching. The fear was so dense I could almost taste it, metallic on my tongue, mingled with the smell of sweat and bleach. Time became meaningless. Minutes felt like hours. Every heartbeat deafened me. Every tiny noise became unbearable. My mind conjured scenarios, each more horrifying than the last. My friends' hands shook as they clutched their knees. Whispers cut through the silence. "It's still out there, isn't it?" The air felt thick, heavy. I imagined shadows crawling along the walls, shapes forming in the darkness. Every flicker of light from the vents made me jump. Every creak became a story. My own pulse was a drumbeat of fear, echoing in the silence. I kept replaying every movement I made that day, wondering if it had noticed, wondering if it had been following me all along, and then nothing. Footsteps stopped. The whisper vanished. Police arrived later, sweeping the gym, hallways, and every corner. No one was there, but muddy footprints stretched across the tiles, leading straight into the showers, and never came back out. Even now, thinking about it sends chills through me. The emptiness, the silence, the feeling of being watched, these haunted me more than any footsteps or whisper ever could. Something had been there. Something still lingered. Waiting. Even after the police cleared the gym, the air felt wrong. I stayed behind for a moment, standing near the lockers, listening. The gym was silent, but it didn't feel empty. I could almost feel the weight of someone or something watching me. My hair stood on end as I slowly walked toward the exit, every step echoing like thunder in the cavernous space. The shadows seemed to twitch slightly as if following me, bending unnaturally around the corners. I could feel a chill brushing my neck like icy fingers trailing over my skin. I tried to tell myself it was just a draft, just imagination, but I knew better. Something had been here, something patient, waiting. And maybe it was still here, just hidden in the darkness, unseen. I pictured it in my mind, creeping silently along the hallways, slipping past locked doors, sliding between shadows without making a sound. I imagined it peeking through vents, the outline of a hooded figure, tall and thin, every movement deliberate. My imagination ran wild. Maybe it was waiting for the next practice, the next student alone in the gym. Maybe it never left at all. Maybe it could appear anywhere. Even now, months later, I sometimes see shadows move just slightly differently than they should. A flicker in the corner of my vision. A creak in the house when I know I'm alone. My friends noticed it too, reporting the same eerie feelings, the same sudden chills, the same whispering thought. I'm still here. The fear never leaves. The gym, the shadows, the whisper, the footsteps, they all remain, etched into my memory, permanent. It's not the memory of what happened that scares me most. It's the certainty that something unseen, deliberate, and patient exists, and that somewhere, right now, it could be watching, waiting. And I know one thing for sure, the next time I hear footsteps in a quiet hallway, I won't need imagination to see it. I'll know it's real. I bolted out of that hallway, my heart hammering, swearing I would never return. But even after I escaped, the memory of those shadows, the whispers, and the figure that watched me stayed with me. I kept thinking the school was quiet, safe. Until the next day, rumors started spreading about a lockdown that trapped students in their classrooms. And what happened inside would make me realize some places in this school are far darker than anyone imagines. It was just another afternoon when the alarms blared. Students had to stay in their classrooms while something, or someone, roamed the empty hallways. The panic was instant, but the eeriest part was the whispers. Voices coming from places no one should have been able to reach. It was late afternoon, and most students had already left. The classroom was quiet except for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Papers rustled gently as the air conditioning cycled on and off. I stayed behind to finish a project, the sound of my pencil scratching across the notebook unusually loud in the empty room. I glanced at the clock. 5 more minutes, I told myself, then I could leave. But when I went to grab my bag, the door wouldn't budge. I tugged harder, thinking it had stuck. Nothing. The lock clicked, but it didn't open. I looked around. The room seemed unchanged, except the shadows were longer, darker, almost alive. A chill ran down my spine. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it was just imagination, but the feeling of unease refused to leave. My fingers trembled as I tugged at the door again, each failed attempt making the air feel heavier, the shadows darker, pressing closer with each second. I took a few cautious steps back into the center of the room, heart hammering. At first it was small things, the scrape of a chair across the floor, a faint breeze even though all the windows were closed. Then the air seemed to grow colder, almost solid, brushing against my skin like icy fingers. I whispered, "Hello?" But the room swallowed my voice. My pencil rolled off the desk and I jumped, imagining a shadow rising from the corner. The fluorescent lights flickered once, twice, and I could swear something moved in the darkness at the far edge of the room. I remembered the rumors, stories from older students, whispered warnings of strange occurrences after hours. Some said they had heard whispers. Others claimed they saw shadows moving with minds of their own. I never believed them, thinking it was just imagination or boredom. But now, crouched behind a desk, I remembered each story vividly, a figure standing silently, unseen yet watching, doors slamming without cause, sudden cold spots that made your skin crawl. That feeling I had dismissed before now returned, more intense, more insistent, wrapping itself around me like a living thing. I moved cautiously toward the window, testing every possible escape. Each step was measured, careful, but even then I could hear the soft creak of the floorboards behind me. Something was there, just beyond sight. My eyes scanned every corner. The closet door at the back seemed slightly ajar. The coat hook swayed slowly, though there was no wind. I whispered, "Is someone there?" My voice sounded weak, almost swallowed by the room itself. I could feel my pulse in my temples, a steady drumbeat of panic. Something unseen was moving with me, keeping pace silently, patient. At the back of the room, near the closet, I caught movement. A figure, barely visible, seemed to materialize from the darkness. It didn't walk or run, it just existed. Shadows curled around it like smoke. My stomach churned, my legs refused to move. The figure remained still, yet somehow I felt its gaze burning into my back. Every instinct screamed to flee, but every escape route seemed blocked. My mind raced. Was it human? Something else? I couldn't tell. And then the faintest sound, a soft, deliberate breathing, echoed in the room. Not mine. Something was alive, patient, and watching. I sank to the floor, trying to calm myself. Rational thoughts raced through my mind. Maybe it's a student hiding. Maybe it's just a trick of the shadows. But my gut told me otherwise. The room itself seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with each exhale of fear. Every object felt charged with possibility. The rolling chair, the stacks of notebooks, the dusty curtains swaying slightly. I imagined what it could do, silently moving closer, reaching out, remaining just beyond vision. My hands shook, my breath hitched, and I realized the fear was no longer just about being trapped. It was about being observed by something intelligent, patient, and hungry for attention. I remembered hearing about students who stayed late in this classroom. Some had seen things. Some had never returned the same. One student swore that after hours, shadows moved against the light, whispering words no one could understand. Another claimed that when they left, they felt eyes following them all the way home. I had dismissed these stories until now, when the fear felt tangible, pressing against my chest like a living weight. A chair slid slightly across the floor, just enough to make me jump. Papers rustled, though I hadn't touched them. The classroom air felt colder, thicker, almost viscous. Every sound amplified, every shadow stretched unnaturally across the walls. I whispered again, "Who's there?" Nothing. But I could feel it. Something just beyond the edge of my vision, moving with deliberate patience. My imagination swirled with possibilities. It could be watching from behind the curtains, from inside the closet, even from beneath the desks. And then, softly, a voice, so faint it was almost imagined, slid through the room. "You can't leave." My breath caught. The shadows seemed to lean closer. My hair stood on end. Every instinct screamed to run, but I knew I couldn't. The figure didn't move, yet its presence filled every inch of the classroom. I pressed myself against the floor, trying not to breathe too loudly, trying not to alert it further. I imagined sprinting toward the door, throwing it open, running down the hall to freedom. But in my mind, the figure followed, silent and precise, always just beyond reach. Shadows twisted unnaturally, blocking exits, stretching along the walls. The air felt alive, heavy, thick with something unseen. My heart pounded. I realized that even if I escaped, it would remain. Watching, patient, waiting. Eventually I heard footsteps in the hallway. Relief surged, but only briefly. When the janitor unlocked the door and I bolted out, I didn't look back. The classroom door clicked shut behind me, but the memory of the figure stayed. Even now, when I pass that classroom, the shadows feel different. They twist just slightly, unnaturally. A chill runs down my spine. I hear whispers too faint to understand. I know without doubt that something is still there. Watching, waiting. Fear isn't about what you can see, it's about what you know is there, patient, intelligent, and deliberate. The classroom is quiet now, but the memory of that day will never leave. Sometimes, when the lights flicker, I hear the soft scrape of a chair. I feel a presence in the corner of my vision, and I remember the whisper, "You can't leave." The next time you're alone in a room after everyone else has left, consider this. Maybe the shadows aren't just shadows. Maybe they're waiting for you too. It started as a normal day. I was late leaving class, gathering books and notes. The hallways were quiet, almost eerily so. Most students had gone home, leaving the school unusually still. As I turned a corner near the old science wing, I noticed a faint draft coming from a narrow doorway I had never seen before. Curious, I stepped closer. The doorframe was old, worn, and slightly crooked. The hallway beyond stretched into darkness, deeper than the building's blueprints should allow. I hesitated. Something about it felt wrong. The air smelled different, damp, earthy, almost metallic. My instincts screamed to walk away, but curiosity pressed me forward. The hallway was narrow, dimly lit by flickering fluorescent lights that buzzed softly. The walls were lined with lockers, but they were older than any in the main halls, rusted and dented. Every step I took echoed too loudly, bouncing off the walls like a warning. As I moved deeper, I noticed details that didn't make sense. A classroom door with no label, a bulletin board with papers from decades ago, and tiles that didn't match the rest of the school. Shadows pooled in corners that had no light, and I felt a chill creeping up my spine. Every sound seemed exaggerated, the hum of the lights, my own breathing, a faint scuff of something moving just out of sight. I remembered older students whispering about the lost hallway. They said it appeared to certain students only, and those who entered never forgot it. Some claimed the hallway moved, stretching further the deeper you walked. Others spoke of strange sounds, footsteps echoing behind them when no one else was there. I laughed at the stories back then. Now, walking in its dim light, I realized the rumors were warnings, not tales. I paused mid-step. A locker rattled somewhere behind me. My heart jumped. I turned slowly, but nothing was there. The hallway stretched endlessly, yet the walls seemed closer than they should be, pressing in on me like an invisible weight. I whispered, "Hello?" My voice sounded tinny, swallowed by the narrow space. The air seemed to thicken with each word, heavy and oppressive. My mind raced. Maybe it's a prank. Maybe I imagined the draft, the sounds. But deep down, I knew better. Something was here, and it was aware of me. I tried to calm myself. Rational thoughts battled fear. It's just an old hallway, just the wind, just shadows. But every instinct screamed otherwise. My pulse hammered, my stomach twisted. Every step felt like a misstep, every echo exaggerated. I imagined the hallway itself as alive, the walls breathing, stretching, shifting just enough to disorient me. As I continued, shadows stretched unnaturally across the floor. Every flicker of the light revealed shapes that weren't there before, lingering just long enough to unsettle me. I could hear soft scuffing, whispers too faint to understand. Each noise made me flinch. The hallway was no longer a hallway, it was a trap, a labyrinth, a place where reality bent just enough to keep me off balance. I remembered stories about students who wandered here after hours, never seeing anyone else in the hallway. Some said they tried to leave, but ended up back at the same spot they started. Others described whispers calling their names, shadows shifting unnaturally. I never believed it until now, walking through a space that didn't make sense, feeling watched from every corner. Ahead, I noticed a silhouette, tall, dark, humanoid, but its features were impossible to make out. It didn't move, but seemed to absorb the flickering light around it. My heart pounded. I tried to back away slowly, but the hallway seemed to elongate, stretching, twisting, and keeping the figure just ahead of me. I whispered, "Who's there?" Nothing. Silence. Then a soft, deliberate footstep echoed from behind me. My stomach twisted. I was not alone. I crouched beside a locker, trying to control my breath. Rational thoughts clashed with fear. I reasoned with myself, maybe it's a student, a janitor, someone hiding. But deep down, I knew it wasn't human. The shadows shifted unnaturally, curling around the figure ahead. Every sound was amplified, the hum of lights, the creak of lockers, the distant whisper that seemed to echo my own name. The hallway seemed alive. A locker rattled, a door slammed somewhere ahead, a draft chilled the back of my neck. The figure remained ahead, silent, patient. I could see the edges of shadows curling unnaturally, as if moving with intention. My mind filled with possibilities. What if it could see everything I do? What if the hallway itself responded to fear? I imagined it closing in on me silently, following my every move, stretching the corridor so I could never reach the exit. My hands shook. My knees felt weak. I realized the stories were true. This hallway was not ordinary, and I had walked into its trap. And then I heard it, faint, cold, deliberate. "You shouldn't be here." I froze. Every hair on my body stood on end. The walls seemed to close slightly, shadows leaning toward me. My pulse thundered in my ears. I wanted to run, but every step forward felt impossible. The hallway stretched endlessly, keeping the figure just out of reach, the whispers brushing against my mind like icy fingers. I imagined throwing myself at the end of the hallway, bursting through a door into freedom. But no matter how fast I ran in my mind, the hallway elongated, stretched, twisted. The figure stayed ahead, always, just out of reach. I could feel its awareness, deliberate, patient. Every step I took echoed in the silence, marking my presence to whatever was waiting here. Eventually, I stumbled back to the corner of the hallway where I first entered. The doorway was still there, seemingly ordinary again. I bolted out, heart racing, never looking back. But the memories stayed, the shadows, the whispers, the figure, they haunted me long after I left. Even now, years later, when I pass that section of the school, I feel the same chill. Shadows twist unnaturally, faint whispers drift from corners, and I remember the hallway is still there, and so is it, waiting. Fear isn't about what you can see, it's about what you know is there, intelligent, patient, deliberate. The hallway may appear ordinary to others, but I know the truth. Some places aren't meant to be entered. Some shadows aren't meant to be noticed. And if you ever find a door or hallway that feels wrong, trust your instincts, step back, walk away. Because once you enter, even for a moment, the memory and the presence never leaves. After that night in the cafeteria, I promised myself I would never stay late again. But the building seemed to remember me. Strange creaks, whispers in empty hallways. And one day, near the maintenance room, I found something I shouldn't have. A brass janitor's key lying on the floor, waiting to unlock secrets far worse than shadows. I picked up the key, heart pounding, curiosity overpowering my fear. It didn't belong to me, and yet I knew I had to see where it led. The hallway stretched out, silent, as though it were breathing. Every step I took toward that locked door made me feel smaller, watched, and I had no idea what waited behind it. It started like any other day. I was walking through the school hallways, just finishing up my last class, my backpack heavy with notebooks. The halls were mostly empty, just a few students lingering near the exits. Then, near the old maintenance room, I noticed something glinting on the floor. A small brass key, old, worn and heavy in my hand. It had a janitor's tag attached to it, faded and scratched with numbers I didn't recognize. I knew I shouldn't, but curiosity got the better of me. Why would a janitor leave a key lying on the floor? And why here, in this quiet, empty hallway? I pocketed it, glancing around. The hallway felt colder than it should, darker somehow. I told myself it was just shadows stretching in the afternoon light. But the moment I picked up that key, something about the air changed. The hum of the fluorescent light seemed louder, sharper, and I could swear I heard faint, soft footsteps just behind me, even though the hall was empty. I wandered slowly, looking for a door it might open. Every locker I passed seemed a little too tall, a little too dark. My heart started pounding. The janitor's key wouldn't fit into anything obvious at first, until I noticed a small, unmarked door at the end of the hall. I hesitated. It was old, paint peeling, and the frame slightly crooked, the kind of door you pass by every day without noticing. But today it was calling to me. I slid the key into the lock, and it turned smoothly, almost too easily. A soft click echoed in the empty hall, and the door creaked open. Inside, darkness, thick, heavy darkness that swallowed the edges of the room. The faint smell of dust and something earthy reached my nose. I stepped in cautiously, the key dangling in my hand. My sneakers squeaked on the wooden floor. The room was silent, but the silence felt wrong. Alive, almost, like it was waiting for me. I flipped the light switch, but nothing happened. The fluorescent bulbs flickered weakly, giving only enough light to see outlines of old furniture and shelves. The air was stale and cold, brushing against my skin like icy fingers. I tried to convince myself it was just an old storage room, but then I heard it, a faint scraping noise from the far corner. I froze. My brain screamed, "It's just a rat! It's just a rat!" But my gut knew better. The scraping continued, slow, deliberate, as if someone, or something, was shifting objects, hiding from view, but aware of me. I swallowed hard and whispered, "Hello." No answer. I moved cautiously deeper, the key clutched in my hand. Old shelves leaned over, covered in dust and forgotten papers. Everything smelled of mildew, but beneath that was something else, something metallic, faint, like blood. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, measuring my movements. I stepped over a small pile of boxes, and the sound they made echoed strangely, louder than it should. A shadow shifted at the corner of my eye. I spun around, but nothing was there. My pulse raced. I tried to calm myself. It's just shadows, just your imagination, but I could feel a presence, patient, deliberate, waiting for me to make a mistake. I remembered older students talking about the janitor of this school. They said he never cleaned certain rooms, never entered some hallways after dark. Some whispered that he knew things, strange things about the building, that the school itself had secrets. I never believed it. But standing here now in a room no one uses, with shadows stretching unnaturally and that key heavy in my hand, I felt that all those stories had been warnings. A cabinet door creaked open slowly. I froze. Nothing should move by itself. My mind raced. Maybe the air draft, maybe an old hinge, but then I heard it, a soft, deliberate shuffle of footsteps, too slow and measured to be a rat. Something was in the room with me. I pressed myself against a shelf, heart hammering, trying to listen. The steps circled the room, gentle but deliberate. I whispered, "Who's there?" No answer, just the soft scraping of shoes, or something that moved like shoes, shifting across the floor. My stomach turned cold. I knew whatever it was aware of me, watching, patient. I tried to reason. Maybe it was just my imagination, overthinking shadows and noises, but rational thoughts didn't calm me. Every nerve in my body screamed, every hair on my arm stood on end. I felt trapped, even though the door was behind me, unlocked and ready to flee through. The key felt heavier in my hand, almost like it was influencing me. My chest tightened. I imagined the shadows stretching closer, bending the edges of the room, turning ordinary objects into something sinister. A chair that leaned against the wall looked like it had claws. The pile of boxes seemed to twitch. My mind raced. It knows I'm here. I took a step toward the exit. A shadow moved just slightly, almost imperceptibly. I froze. Another step, and I swore it shifted again, stretching toward me. The room felt alive, aware. Whispers, soft, nearly inaudible, slid along the walls. "Stay. Don't leave." My breath caught in my throat. I bolted for the door, and the shadows seemed to recoil slightly, like they were letting me escape, but only to follow me outside. My sneakers squeaked against the floor as I ran into the hallway, the door slamming softly behind me. Even in the bright hallway, I could feel it. The room behind me pulsed in memory, shadows twisting in impossible shapes. I kept the key in my pocket, but I could feel it almost humming, alive in my hand. My thoughts returned again and again to the room, the scraping noises, the shadows, the whispering voice. I told myself I would never go back, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the building itself remembered me, that whatever was in that room could track me, waiting, patient. Days later, I walked past the maintenance room again. The door looked ordinary, worn, nothing unusual about it. I thought I was safe until I felt a draft and the faint sound of scraping from inside. My chest tightened. The key burned in my pocket, heavier than before. I realized the fear would never leave. Even now, I feel watched in quiet hallways. Shadows linger too long. Doors creak without reason. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I can hear a faint whisper. "You found me." Even after I ran from that maintenance room, I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. Shadows lingered longer than they should, and every quiet hallway made me jump. And then, a few days later, I missed my last bus home. At first, it seemed ordinary, but walking alone that night would teach me just how patient fear can be. It was late afternoon, and I had stayed after school to finish a project. By the time I stepped outside, the streets were quiet, empty. I checked my phone. My bus had already left. Great, I thought. Now I have to walk home. At first, it felt normal, even peaceful. Street lights flickered on one by one, casting long shadows across the pavement. The occasional car passed by, headlights cutting through the darkness. But something felt off, too quiet. My footsteps echoed unnaturally, bouncing between the buildings. I told myself it was just my imagination, but a chill ran down my spine. Halfway down the main street, I noticed movement at the edge of my vision. A shadow that shouldn't be there, shifting across the alley to my right. I turned quickly. Nothing. Just the flickering streetlight. I shook my head. It's fine. You're just tired. But the feeling didn't leave. I slowed my pace, trying to act casual, but I couldn't shake the sensation that I was being followed. Every soft sound, my sneakers scraping on the pavement, a distant dog barking, felt amplified. I remembered friends warning me about walking late. Don't take shortcuts, they'd say. Stay on main streets, don't talk to strangers. I always laughed. But now, alone, I remembered one story that stuck. A student walked home and swore something followed them for blocks, always just out of sight, keeping pace with them. They ran, they hid, but the presence stayed. I laughed nervously at first, but my heart knew the story wasn't just a tale. As I approached a familiar intersection, my phone flickered low on battery. I decided to take a shortcut through a small alley I hadn't used before. It was narrower than I remembered, flanked by high brick walls. The streetlights didn't reach here. Shadows pooled in the corners, stretching unnaturally. I paused. The air felt heavier, colder. My footsteps echoed louder than they should. I glanced behind me. For a brief second, I thought I saw a figure standing in the shadows at the far end of the alley. I blinked. Nothing. I tried to reason. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe someone was walking far behind me. But my gut told me something was there. Something patient. Something aware. I could feel it. It wasn't just following, it was studying, calculating. My pace quickened. My mind ran through possibilities. If it's human, maybe it wants to rob me, but if it's not, what then? My chest tightened, and a wave of adrenaline surged through me. I had to keep moving. The alley seemed alive. Trash shifted slightly as I passed. A loose shutter banged against the wall. A faint whisper brushed against my ear. "Why are you here?" I spun around. Nothing. Just the darkness stretching endlessly ahead. Every step echoed, and I swore I heard soft footsteps behind me, matching my pace, but when I turned, the alley was empty. My stomach churned. I realized that the presence wasn't hiding. It was patient, waiting for me to panic. I thought about stories of people who walked late at night and never returned the same. One friend described a shadow that followed, always just out of reach, bending the environment to keep you disoriented. Another spoke of whispers calling your name from empty streets. I laughed nervously back then. Now, walking this alley, I knew those stories were warnings. A faint shape appeared ahead, a figure, dark, tall, almost featureless. I froze. It didn't move but seemed aware of me, anticipating my every step. I tried to stay calm, whispering, "Hello?" No answer, just the echo of my own voice. The figure seemed to stretch and warp slightly with the shadows around it. My pulse pounded. Every instinct screamed to run, but my legs felt heavy, like I was moving through water. I panicked. My mind raced. Maybe I could outrun it. Maybe I could hide. But the alley felt endless, stretching unnaturally, keeping the figure just ahead, always visible in the corner of my eye. The whispers returned, soft and deliberate. You can't leave. You shouldn't be here. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering. Rational thoughts clashed with primal fear. I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of my imagination, but deep down, I knew it was real. I bolted toward the end of the alley, my shoes scraped on the pavement, my lungs burned. The figure didn't run, didn't chase, it just waited, keeping pace with me in a way that was impossible. Shadows seemed to stretch and bend, walls narrowing, guiding me back toward it. Every instinct screamed to escape, but every step felt like I was deeper in its trap. I stumbled over a cracked curb, almost falling. The figure remained there, featureless, patient, observing. Finally, the alley opened onto a quiet side street. I ran, heart hammering, adrenaline surging. I dared a glance back. The figure was gone. Or maybe it never was fully there. The shadows seemed normal again. The streetlights flickered softly. I told myself I was safe. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. Every faint noise, every shifting shadow made me jump. My imagination ran wild, filling in what I couldn't see. Even now, whenever I walk home late, I remember that alley, the figure, the whispers, the feeling of being watched. I check behind me constantly, jump at every noise. My friends think I'm exaggerating, but I know the truth. Some things only reveal themselves when you're alone. And sometimes, just sometimes, I hear a faint echo of a whisper in an empty street. You shouldn't be here. Fear isn't about what you see, it's about what you feel is there, patient and deliberate. The figure may never appear again, but the memory of that night haunts me. Every empty alley, every quiet street brings it back. And I know now that some presence doesn't need to chase to terrify, it only needs to wait. When I finally reached the safety of a lit street, I thought it was over. But the memory of those shadows stayed, following me, whispering. Fear has a way of lingering. And a few nights later, I stayed late in the cafeteria. Alone, in the quiet, I realized that some places only reveal themselves when no one else is watching. The cafeteria stretched before me, enormous and empty. Lights flickered weakly, long shadows curling across tables. At first, it seemed peaceful, but the air felt thick, alive, and as I stepped further inside, I noticed the subtle movements of objects, the whispers just out of reach, and I knew I wasn't alone. It was Friday, and I had stayed after school to help clean up the cafeteria for the staff. Most students had already left, and the building was quiet, almost too quiet. At first, it felt normal, the soft hum of the lights, the distant sound of janitors in other halls, but something felt off. The cafeteria was enormous, rows of tables stretching further than they should, chairs neatly stacked at the edges. The fluorescent lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows that danced across the linoleum floor. I told myself it was nothing, just the lights acting up, but a shiver ran down my spine. I started wiping tables, humming quietly to myself, trying to ignore the silence. That's when I noticed it. A chair that wasn't where I left it. I swore I stacked it neatly on the side, but now it sat oddly, angled toward the middle of the room. I laughed nervously. I must be tired. But then I noticed more subtle things. A trash bin slightly tipped, a paper sliding across the floor as if pushed by an invisible hand. The cafeteria felt alive, like it was observing me, waiting for a mistake. I tried to calm myself. It's just your imagination. You're alone, it's quiet, and you're seeing shadows stretch. But my heart raced. Every little sound seemed amplified. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant clank of a tray. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was thick, heavy, oppressive. I imagined what it would be like if the cafeteria had a presence, not human, patient, deliberate. something that only revealed itself when you were alone. The thought made my stomach churn. I walked toward the sinks to finish cleaning, and the lights flickered. Long, uneven shadows stretched along the walls, twisting tables and chairs into shapes I didn't recognize. I thought I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. A chair shifted slightly, a tray slid across a table. I froze, my breath caught. The cafeteria was quiet, but I could feel something watching, lingering just beyond my vision. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, almost as if the room itself was bending around me. I remembered older students warning me about staying late. The cafeteria is weird after hours, they said. Stuff moves, people hear whispers, don't stay alone. I always laughed it off. But standing here now, alone in the huge space with shadows twisting around every corner, I realized those weren't stories, they were warnings. A tray slid off a table, clattering softly to the floor. I jumped. My heart pounded, adrenaline surging. I whispered, "Hello?" Nothing. Silence. Then a soft scraping noise behind me, slow and deliberate. I spun around. The room was empty. The shadows seemed to shift toward the noise. I could feel their presence. It wasn't human, not entirely. Something patient, deliberate, and aware was moving in the room with me, watching, waiting for me to panic. I crouched behind a table, trying to control my breath. Rational thoughts battled fear. It's just a draft. It's just shadows. You're overthinking. But my instincts screamed otherwise. Every creak of a chair, every flicker of light felt intentional. The cafeteria wasn't just empty, it was alive. I imagined what it could do. Chairs sliding toward me, tables leaning as if trying to block my path, shadows curling around my feet. My hands shook, my pulse thundered. I realized the stories I dismissed as a kid weren't lies, they were truths, twisted and hidden in plain sight. A shadow stretched across the far wall, moving independently of the lights. Another curled near a corner. Soft whispers echoed, too faint to understand. "You shouldn't be here." I stood up, shaking. My legs felt weak. I took a cautious step forward, and a tray tipped over again, seemingly rolling on its own. My mind raced. Was it testing me, guiding me, or just showing that it knew I was alone? I tried to make my way to the door. The cafeteria seemed bigger than it should. Tables that were at the edges now seemed to block my path. Shadows pooled in corners, stretching unnaturally, almost as if the room itself was reshaping. Every step I took echoed, amplified, like the space was laughing at my panic. I whispered, "I just want to leave." And for a second I thought I heard a faint echo of my own voice, twisted, slower, and mocking. I remembered hearing stories about students who stayed late in the cafeteria. They described shadows moving, whispers calling their names, objects sliding across tables. Most people thought they were exaggerating, but now, alone here, I knew they weren't. Whatever this was, it existed in the space itself, feeding on fear, patience, and attention. I finally reached the exit. The door seemed further away than it should. Shadows stretched along the walls, twisting toward me. A soft breath brushed against my neck. I spun around. Nothing, but I felt it. The presence wasn't far. It was all around me, patient, deliberate, watching my every move. I bolted for the door. Chairs scraped behind me. Tables seemed to lean slightly, shadows curling to block my path. My sneakers squeaked on the floor as I ran, heart pounding, adrenaline surging. Finally, I reached the door, flung it open, and stepped into the hall. The lights in the hallway were normal, the school quiet, and I thought I was safe. But I could feel the memory of the cafeteria, the shadows, and the whispers lingering. Even now I think about that night. About the tables that moved, the shadows that stretched unnaturally, the whispers that called my name. I check the cafeteria every day, The doors look normal, the lights stable, the space ordinary, but I know better. Some spaces aren't empty, they just wait, patient, observant, and sometimes they remind you that you're never really alone. Fear isn't just about what you see, it's about what you know is there. The cafeteria may appear empty to everyone else, but I know it isn't. Shadows wait in corners. Objects shift subtly. Whispers brush against your mind. And I know one thing for sure. Some presences don't need to chase you to terrify you. They just need to wait. Patient. Watching. Even after I escaped the cafeteria that night, I could still feel the shadows watching. Some presences don't leave when you run. They follow in memory. And one night, alone in the locker room, I noticed something else waiting for me. A mirror that shouldn't have been there. It was foggy, streaked, and slightly crooked. At first, I thought it was just a new addition. But as I stared, I noticed my reflection, hesitating, and then smiling when I didn't. That was the moment I realized. Some reflections don't just show you what's there, they show you what's waiting. It was late, and the gym had emptied after basketball practice. I lingered behind to grab my bag from the locker room. The place smelled like sweat and cleaning supplies, but something felt off. The lights flickered faintly, and I could hear the faint hum of the air vent. I opened my locker, tossing in my jacket, and that's when I saw it, an old mirror mounted above the sinks. I didn't remember it being there. The glass was slightly foggy, with streaks like someone had wiped it carelessly. I shrugged it off. Maybe it was new, maybe I hadn't noticed. But when I looked closer, I noticed my reflection didn't move quite right. I blinked, and for a second my reflection hesitated before mimicking me. My heart skipped. I leaned in. Nothing. Just me. I laughed nervously. "You're tired. Just practice. Adrenaline, shadows." But the reflection, it wasn't exactly me. It smiled when I didn't. Its eyes lingered a little too long. I felt an icy chill run down my spine. My pulse quickened. I stepped back from the mirror, shaking my head. It's just a trick of the light, just a foggy mirror. You're imagining things. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The locker room felt colder than it should, darker, as if the shadows themselves were thicker. I tried to leave, but the reflection didn't move when I stepped back. I froze. My own reflection should have mirrored me instantly. It didn't. A locker creaked behind me. I spun around. Empty. I looked back at the mirror. My reflection tilted its head, grinning slowly. My stomach churned. I whispered, "Who's there?" Nothing, just the reflection. Then a faint voice, soft, almost like it came from the glass itself. "Stay." I jumped back. My bag slipped from my hands, spilling onto the floor. The echo of the fall sounded unnaturally loud in the room. I wanted to leave, run, anything, but my legs refused to move. Scene 5, flashback, locker room stories. I remembered stories from older students, whispers about the mirror in the locker room, strange reflections, figures that appeared when no one else was around. I had laughed back then, thinking it was just rumors, but standing here, frozen in front of that glass, I realized the stories were warnings. I backed toward the door, eyes never leaving the mirror. Shadows seemed to twist slightly in the corners, and the reflection, my reflection, tilted unnaturally. I reached the handle. It moved just slightly, like something unseen brushed against it. I yanked the door open and bolted into the hallway. The fluorescent lights in the gym flickered, then stabilized. I dared a glance back. The mirror in the locker room looked normal, almost innocuous, but I knew better. Even now, weeks later, I can't stop thinking about it. Sometimes when I pass the locker room, I feel the cold, and shadows seem to cling to the corners. I know it's still there, waiting, patient, watching. At night, I dream of the reflection tilting its head, smiling, whispering my name, soft, deliberate, chilling. Stay. I try to convince myself I'm safe. Rationally, it's just a mirror, just imagination, just the stress of late practice. But I can't shake the feeling that it's aware of me, waiting, patient, always patient. Even when I'm in my room, I imagine the reflection moving slightly, waiting for the right moment to step out of the glass. Every creak, every shadow makes my heart pound a little faster. A few nights later, I checked my phone before bed and noticed a faint streak on the camera lens. I wiped it, but the next morning, a shadowy shape appeared in the corner of a locker room selfie I didn't remember taking. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but I could feel its eyes on me through the glass. The realization hit me. The mirror wasn't just in the locker room, it was following me, patient, waiting. Fear isn't about what you see, it's about what knows you. Mirrors can lie, shadows can wait, whispers can follow you long after you leave the room. And sometimes, if you're alone in a quiet place and your reflection hesitates, you'll know. Something is watching. Something is patient. And that's it for tonight's stories. But remember, just because the video ends, it doesn't mean the shadows disappear. Some things are still watching, still waiting, maybe even right where you are. Did you feel that chill when the lights flickered? Or hear a whisper you weren't expecting? If so, you're not alone. If you want to survive the next hour of fear, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell, and join us for more stories that will crawl under your skin and keep you awake long after the screen goes dark. Sleep tight, if you can, and keep one eye open, because you never know what might be lingering in the corners of your room tonight.